Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Shaded Youth. As usual, we have another special guest on for today. We have the one and only Momodou Taal, if that's how you pronounce it. Let me know if I'm wrong.
That's correct. That's correct.
That's correct.
Momodou Taal.
Okay. Okay. All the way from Egypt, but based in the UK previously. He is big in political activism, but also currently studying the traditional sciences in Cairo as of right now. So without further ado, Assalamu alaikum, Mamadou. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Shakil. And it's an honor to be in conversation with you.
Alhamdulillah. So just to start off, for the viewers who may not know about your work and what you do or what you're even about, could you just give like a brief summary as to that?
I always find those questions so difficult to answer. Because like, what do I do? What do I do? Okay. To long story short, I'm involved with right now trying to provide political education for a lot of people via Instagram, via social media, trying to kind of get people. And, sometimes people talk about, I'm just being objective, I'm having an objective analysis. No. I have an agenda. I definitely have an agenda. My agenda is I hope people are, and I know this is going to sound I know there's because of due to the securitization of Muslims, the word radical, people are afraid of it, but I'm not. I call myself a black radical, and I want people to adopt radical politics. So I try to wake people up, quote unquote, wake people up. I try to point to the conditions that people find themselves in and hopefully draw the links to those conditions. So the links between capitalism and colonialism and imperialism, the links between what we find the police force in America and then what we find in Israel. New York, you said you're from New York, yeah?
Yeah.
So the New York Police State Department is an international body. It's and in the States, it acts as an occupying domestic force. So again, that's like what I'm doing now. What kind of led me to that is that I'm a Muslim, alhamdulillah. I started practicing, however people want to understand that, whatever that means. I started practicing at the age of 16. And then I wanted to learn my deen more. So I moved to Cairo at the age of just after university, 21, 22. I learned Arabic. I'm still memorizing Quran. I finished Al-Azhar preparatory school, it's like a school you go to before you enter university. And then I studied in Azhar Mosque. I also outside study in a place called Markaz Imam Malik as well. It's funny because I've shifted. Before I wanted to be a sheikh, but not anymore. And we can talk about that as well.
Okay, that sounds amazing. So just to start off from the beginning, because I know you also have a podcast, The Malcolm Effect, which the name in itself has a ton of things to go into. But the very first episode, I remember hearing it, it was basically just about how you grew up pretty much and all the influences that got you to where you are. So could you talk a little bit about the area of England specifically where you were raised and some of the things that happened to you that kind of shifted your mindset of the world?
Yeah, absolutely. So raised in a place called Stratford, which is East London today. And typical, I guess, I don't know where you're from in the New York, but I know
I'm in Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. So yeah. Okay, you lot have blocks, you lot have hoods, you lot have what we call in UK slang the ends. So I grew up in the ends or the block.
So it's like the project?
Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, grew up and, just the usual patterns of those things follow the same kind of socioeconomic leanings as everywhere else. So, poor working class family, usually black and brown areas. So I grew up in that area. I was a very naughty kid. I said it on my podcast. I was a naughty kid. So we call our primary school what do you call your school that before you go to high school?
So it's 3 phases. So elementary school, middle school, and then high school.
Okay, so we finished our primary school when we're 11 years old. Okay. I got kicked out on my last day of primary school. I got excluded. I won't tell you why. And I got kicked out of and I got excluded a few times from school. So I'm a very naughty kid. I mentioned in my podcast that I've been arrested a few times and just a very naughty kid. But because I put it down to 2 things. Alhamdulillah, and right now I've grown a little bit, but in those days I was quite short. So, you know, when you have short man syndrome, you have to, you do the most to kind of make your mark, or you do the most
Overcompensate, right?
Overcompensate,
Yeah.
exactly. So I overcompensated, and I was like, I wanted to be the person that had the most status, or whatever that means. And then when about the age of 13, my mum moved me to Birmingham, partly because of the trouble I was getting in. A friend of mine was killed. So my mom's like, yeah, we have to kind of get you out of this. I moved to Birmingham, and then we just start again. And then, you know, haven't got the same support network of friends. I'm a nobody now. I've got to be a bit more humble. Then then I have a few racist encounters in school. When I was like 15, 16. One that always comes to mind, and I say it a few times, but it's something that's going to be etched in my memory for a long time. Because I think as well, it's like, at the time it happened, you can't even make the link as to what it will propel you to do in the future. But looking back now, I got to thank that white boy for being racist to me, because now you don't know what you unleash now. So I remember at the election of Barack Obama, 2008, he was elected. So about 2007, 2008, we had something called Youth Parliament in the UK. Me being inspired by Obama, unfortunately, but at the time I decided to run for youth elections, which means you become like a youth, equivalent to a youth senator. You know, it's quite a big role. So as I was going to different classes, getting votes, it's custom that people in your own school vote for you. So, okay, so I'm going for different classes. I'm like, hey, I'm running for election. This is my manifesto. Please vote for me. Then the kids looked at me and then looked at the sheet, because the sheet obviously had about 20, 25 people on there. And then he said, I'm going to look for the white face to vote for. And I said, so there's me trying to be so diplomatic and intellectual. And so I said, oh, but I'm British too. Why would you vote for the white face when I'm British too? And then he says to me, if a dog is born in a stable, it doesn't make it a horse.
Yeah.
So I was like, to be fair, I think for a 15-year-old looking back, that's quite an ingenious way of doing racism, if I'm honest. So I was like, okay, cool. And then it got a bit physical, and it turned into a whole mess. Then about 16 years, and then I remember I got really upset. No, I wasn't upset. I got really angry. And then it turned to a fight. And then my teacher pulled me to the side. The teacher I had was very cool with me. Like, we got along really well. But he said to me, Momodou, you should be more like Martin and less like Malcolm. And I was like, obviously at the time, we are taught, I know America is different. You guys are much more fortunate to have a better understanding of Malcolm and Martin.
I'm not so sure about that. Just
really?
So sorry to interrupt, but
That's fine.
Basically in middle school, like I remember, and even high school, I remember two examples that glare into my head when I think of like Malcolm X or like the Black Panthers. One was in 7th grade English when we were going through history, you know, talking about Martin Luther and Black Panthers, and she basically positioned the Black Panthers as like the radical group, right? You know, violence, you know, the ones that didn't really bring about that much change. It was really Martin who did that because of his nonviolent approach. And then I remember in 11th grade English, you know, English teachers, I don't know what it is, but we were talking about, you know, different Black historical figures, and Malcolm X was brought up, and this was when I was a bit more educated on him, and I was like, I forget what it was, but I pretty much just brought up the fact that, you know, towards the end of Malcolm X's life, he actually had a more of a balanced approach towards race, you know, not really dividing, you know, Black people and white people, and that was due to his, you know, the Hajj and whatnot. And she was actually very surprised about that. And this is like a teacher, and she was like, "Wait, really? I thought he was like, you know, just violent all around. Like, it's so weird." Yeah, yeah. This is like a teacher. I don't know. I was really surprised by that.
That I mean, see, okay, that is the story in most places in the world, and let's be honest, that is deliberate. They want people to have, you know, an image of Malcolm and an image of Martin. And even the image of Martin in which they paint is not even true. I mean, Martin was very radical, you know,
Right,
at the
right.
same time. But yeah, so my teacher said that to me. And then I was like, okay. And then a year later, around the same time, my friend at the time, he bought me the Autobiography of Malcolm X, as told to Alex Haley. And that was my kind of introduction to Malcolm properly. And then I just fell in love, and I wanted to be like this man so much. I, incessantly stalked his videos on YouTube, trying to memorize his speeches, trying to model my life on him. And then from that point, it's just been continuous. So I remember I posted a picture the other day, a throwback, and I first read the autobiography 12 years ago. And then from there, it's just been a continuation of that. And, like most historical figures, there's so much more to uncover. Later on, I learned that Malcolm X moves to Egypt. He gets an ijazah from Al-Azhar, which many people are unaware of. He becomes one of the first people to receive scholarships to send African Americans to Azhar. I think one thing is it's coming out more and more now, but I think it's a shame it hasn't been done so excessively or focused on. We don't focus a lot on Malcolm's internationalism. We don't focus on his links to South Asia. You don't focus on his links to Latin America or his links to Africa, because his final year of his life was his internationalism. It was him traveling the world. It was him connecting the struggles of Black Americans to people who are oppressed around the world. And then you see that later on by the people he inspires, even though they take different routes, but they continue that international effort. So he inspires obviously the Black Panthers with Fred Hampton. And Fred Hampton, he makes the Rainbow Coalition, tries to bring people all together. Then he also inspires Kwame Ture, formerly Stokely Carmichael, who becomes a Pan-Africanist, who tries to, and he becomes one of the figureheads in condemning what happens in Israel and Palestine. So again, you find that those people who continued Malcolm's legacy or were inspired by him, they also adopted an internationalist approach, and that's my approach as well.
Okay. So the autobiography of Malcolm X is, widely read by Muslims, non-Muslims, but in particular, I know that a lot of people, when they read the autobiography of Malcolm X, that's like their first exposure to Islam as well. A lot of people,
yes,
convert. I believe Imam Zaid Shakir, who's a prominent imam in America, he converted after reading that book. Was that also like a stepping stone for you into becoming more practicing, or were you already like practicing beforehand?
It definitely assisted. No, I wasn't more practicing at the time,
Okay.
but it definitely assisted from what if I can remember correctly. I remember at the time, so when I decided to embrace Islam, well, not embrace as in convert,
Right, yeah.
Family's Muslim, but to start practicing. And I call it embrace because I wasn't really practicing at all. I didn't know how to pray properly even. And when I decided to take that step, I was looking into other religions at the time. So I was looking into Rastafarianism, I was looking into Islam, and Islam made the most sense to me. But then with Malcolm X's autobiography and him attributing so much of his own radical posturing and his commitment to justice came through Islam, it kind of pushed me towards that direction more.
Gotcha. Okay. So there was a question that I did want to ask, just because it seems like every group claims Malcolm X, right? It seems like the right wings, they claim Malcolm X even amongst the Muslims, and then the leftists also claim Malcolm X. I know it's very hard, but could you give like a depiction that's most true to exactly who he was? I know you mentioned his internationalism in this last year, but just combining. I know it's like a hard question, but
the thing is, depending on who you speak to and what angle they're coming from will determine how you define Malcolm.
Okay.
And I feel like it just speaks to the kind of multifaceted human being that he was, that he can be claimed by so many people.
Right.
But what's interesting, so definitely he was a devout Muslim. I mean, Betty Shabazz, his wife, may Allah have mercy on her, says that, make sure that the world knows that Malcolm was a devout Muslim, and make sure that Malcolm's legacy and connection to Islam is also, and Muslims need to claim him. But then what happens is you got many Muslims who are non-Black Muslims claim Malcolm, and they do what they did to Martin. They only focus on his last year of his life. And they don't even focus in an accurate way. They say that, he almost, quote unquote, dropped his radicalism. No, he never. I mean, he was committed to anti-white supremacist stances right to the end of his life. And I think it's a disservice to his legacy to take that away from him. I mean, he was, pro-Black. I mean, you have to say what it was. He was pro-Black. And again, pro-Black doesn't mean anti-anyone else. It just means that, his organizations, which he set up two before he passes away. One for a religious organization and one for just Black people who are of any religion, any creed. So his commitment was to fighting injustice against the system. The difference is, as you said a couple of minutes ago, he was no longer a separatist. He didn't believe in getting a separate state for Black people, but no, he considered himself a part of a global struggle against oppression. So again, if you're going to paint a picture of Malcolm, I would say that it's somewhere in what I just said. It's right, amongst that somewhere.
Okay. So you mentioned in your upbringing that you experienced a lot of racism. You mentioned quote unquote the white boy, and now a lot of the things you speak about is anti-Black rhetoric in the Muslim community. When you were growing up, did you experience any of that as well?
Subtle. So you know how we have microaggressions?
Right.
It's the equivalent of that, but in the mosque. So what I mean by that is you'd have, I would be in the masjid, and then someone will come over to me and say, "Salaam alaikum, brother." Wa alaikum salam. I'm just minding my own Black business. And then you have someone come up to me and say, "Can I teach you how to make wudu?" I'm like, and I'm just thinking to myself, you see, everyone else around me who's not Black, most often than not, you haven't asked any of those people. So why have you taken it upon yourself to approach me and ask, "Can I help you to make wudu?" So I'm like, if the person's elderly, I'll be like, "Yeah, no worries. Thank you. I know, whatever. I won't take it offensively." But I know what they've done because they've seen me, and in their mind, they're thinking one of two things. Either I'm a new Muslim or that I don't know Islam properly. And I think that's a shame because just based on the way I look. Whereas we know, I'm not going to go into it now, but those who know me will know my friend Mustafa Briggs, and you'll know that he, goes around the world teaching people about Black history and Islam, and we have a very rich legacy. I mean, there's no such thing as like this, there is no Islam without Black people, basically, right from the beginning of Islam. So as you can imagine, or for example, one day I walked into another mosque, and it was like Asr with my friend. I was with my friend, again, his name is Fahad. He is Pakistani. And then one man came over to us as we were like crossing paths. And then he said to me, he looked at my friend's, shook my friend's hand and said, "Assalamu alaikum." And he just looked at me and he smiled and said, "MashaAllah." And I'm thinking to myself, are you thinking that, I'm an ex-hood man? This is why I've come to the mosque. Are you happy that I'm here? So again, it's like those microaggressions. As for the more overt stuff, I've not experienced it, but I've seen it online or I've seen it in video. So there's a imam in London, and I believe he's an imam. Yeah, he's a da'i, or he's got some kind of position in a mosque. And, there was a year, I think in 2018, there was a year in Ramadan, which there were several stabbings amongst Muslims. So in the first 5 or 10 days, several Muslims were killed by way of stabbing. There was an increase in gang violence, and it kicked off in Ramadan. So this scholar or da'i or whatever he is, he stood out in a very busy street in Birmingham, and said, "Brothers," with a straight face, "we are not Black. Stop acting like you're Black. Stop acting like you're Black. We are good people." The same scholar said in a mosque that we need to stop acting as if we're Jamaican. We are not Jamaican. We are, we are raised well. So again, that's like the anti-blackness that exists. And that's just one thing. Another thing would be, we've seen the clips always, this hip hop looking brother reciting Quran.
Yeah.
You know, so again, you know, those things exist, and those things speak to the anti-blackness that exists, unfortunately.
Okay. I wanted to ask about another phenomenon. I don't know if it exists in the UK, but in America, Black Muslims, you know, that who come from Africa recently, you know, West Africa, Senegal, Gambia, these countries, they come, and then it's almost as if there's a disconnect between the African Americans that are already here, and it's as if they're Black, and it's as if the Muslims from that recently came over from Africa, they're not Black, right? So they'll view them a certain way, as if, you know, how Desi uncles kind of view them as well. It's if they're not, you know, and of course it's a multi-ethnic kind of community, but I find it interesting how, you know, races here will treat both of them the same way, pretty much, and but one group doesn't really see it that way. Does that happen in the UK? I'm not really entirely sure.
Yeah, it does, because it's a lot to unpack, in the sense that obviously that's the legacy of white supremacy.
Right.
That's the legacy of colonialism, you know, divide and conquer, divide and rule. But also as well, you have that people have brought in, unfortunately, in the Black community, especially in the African immigrant community, they've brought into the idea of the model minority. The model minority meaning that, you know, this is the poster child for what can be achieved in America. So, you know, and you have that, we know, I mean, I think the most educated immigrant group in the United States is the Nigerian community. And again, so people say, oh, how can that be racist? And if Nigerians can come over here and do it? Well, again, there's so much, the histories are completely different. The Nigerians have come over, normally, most often than not, have come over like from middle-class backgrounds in Nigeria. To even get a visa in the first place, you have to be some kind of position of wealth most of the time. Then you have, so the wealth is different. The intentionality of coming to the States is different, and the UK. They've come for education. More often than not, their parents are degree holders or engineers or have good jobs anyway. And we know the stats that if your parents have degrees, you're more often than not going to have a child that has degrees. Right. So again, my point is that the histories and the structural narratives are different. So whereas you know, the African Americans, how many years? It's been generation upon generation. It's been centuries of destruction and you know, kind of destroying the families, not in like the conservative way, or it's the breakdown of Black families. No, I mean in the sense that, you know, there's been a concerted effort to keep certain people in certain positions. So I always say to people, like, it's a shame that African immigrants, and me being an African immigrant myself, I think I mean, I don't subscribe to that thinking at all, but I think it's a shame that people have adopted their thinking, because if you look at the UK context, for example, the Africans that came at the same, because right now it's considered between the Africans and the Jamaicans. So you have the African immigrants sometimes look down on Jamaican immigrants, or the Jamaican granddaughters and grandsons of those who immigrated. So you have like, oh, you know, they don't care about education, and you hear it. But then if that was to be true, you find that the African immigrants that came at the same time, the Jamaican immigrants in the Windrush era after post-World War II, they have the exact same experience, the exact same educational attainment, the exact same social economic mobility prospect. So my point is that, okay, it's nothing to do with, you know, a cultural thing or one being more racist. It's got to do with the histories attached to the different people.
Right. Okay. So it seems like you've been talking about these issues since, you know, you were a teenager. What got you to make the decision to really have a public platform surrounding it? So, like, you know, the Malcolm Effect. Prior to that, you had Baraka Boys podcast with, you know, some of the friends you just mentioned, Mustafa Briggs and your friend Fahad. So what really got you to have that public image eventually?
I mean, it wasn't planned.
Okay.
It wasn't. I didn't think and say, yeah, how am I gonna get loads of followers and how?
No, of course not.
Nah, I mean that genuinely. Like it wasn't planned. It was the Baraka Boys podcast was just I mean, that was started on a whim. Me and my friends went to Morocco, and we genuinely had interesting, well, again, it's subjective, what I thought were interesting conversations. And we thought maybe other people might relate to this, especially young Muslims. We put that out there. It did really well. That kind of increased the following. And then yeah, I don't know. I feel like I didn't want to be in the Muslim scene, and I still don't want to be in the Muslim scene. So that was my kind of exit. I thought, you know what? There's loads of people out there who speak about Islam. There's loads of people out there who are scholars and da'is and ustadh. And for me, it was like, I don't have the same passion for that anymore. I don't see myself sitting in a mosque and teaching tajweed or teaching fiqh. Even though I'm passionate about it and enjoy it myself, but I'm more interested in like the activism and politics at the moment. So then that kind of shifted. I kind of stopped talking about Islam. And as well, I think as a personal note, I didn't want to be a hypocrite. I didn't want to be someone that talks about Islam and I'm not the most, what's the quote? Like, again, I think it's a false dichotomy, but people have an image of what it means to be practicing, even though I don't subscribe to that image. But for me, it was like, yeah, I'm not really that person. And then I kind of shifted out of that. I kind of spoke more and more about race. Even though I've been speaking about these issues for quite some time, I would say since the passing of George Floyd, it kind of just took me in a whole new direction.
Definitely. Especially I think like a couple of days ago, it was the 1 year anniversary.
Yeah.
So you eventually made the choice to direct your political activism and then go over to Egypt to study traditional sciences. Was that a choice that you're still continuing with? Because you mentioned that you don't really want to like teach Islam in the traditional sense anymore. What's the reason for that exactly? And what is the plan now to do with the traditional knowledge that you have gained over the years?
The traditional knowledge will be for myself.
Okay,
and I still enjoy it. I still enjoy it. I still read the books. I still study as well. But it won't be anything. Something that's just like a personal passion of myself, of my own. Yeah, I mean, the plan now, I do want to pursue grad school in the States. I'm trying to move to the States next year, hopefully. I want to do a PhD in history and Black studies and become hopefully like a public academic intellectual.
Okay, gotcha. Was that choice more recent? Because you did mention that they kind of shifted in the past year or so. Passing George Floyd and then.
Yeah, I mean, it was brewing in my mind for quite some time. I thought to myself, do I really see myself being a scholar in a masjid? I don't. I'm too lit for that. No, in all seriousness, I just didn't. I mean, you sit amongst a lot of Muslim circles, especially students of knowledge. And if I'm honest with you, I'm glad that they have a passion, but the level of conversation I found in those circles were just not inspiring for me. So, I mean, I think one of the kind of final nail that kind of in the coffin that kind of took me out was when I believe it was last year, so 2020. And on the group, they were talking about like, can a woman leave the house without her husband's permission? And they were talking about like, can women travel this? Or is music haram? And I thought to myself, like, and then I contrasted that to the activism scene that I'm in. And we're talking about, okay, where do we locate liberation? Is liberation in can we come up with a new ontological perspective of man? And, what is personal versus existential freedom? How can we, is historical dialectical materialism, which is obviously Karl Marx playing on Hegel dialectics, is that still relevant? And I'm thinking like, damn, like these are the conversations I want to be having. And then I'm literally simultaneously, I think that was like the same day. It was like at the same time, I was in two WhatsApp groups, kind of in and out. And one was talking about, can a woman leave the house without husband permission? One was talking about, can a woman taste the food in Ramadan? And the answer was, if the husband's a tyrant and he might beat her up. One was talking about like, astaghfirullah, like women can't refuse her husband sex, and just weird like I mean, I know you're going to go into the disconnect between scholars, and I'm ready to speak about that. But again, that was like my disconnect. And then at the same time, simultaneously, I'm having conversations about like liberation and freedom and liberation theology and, you know, the new understanding of man and capitalism and racial capitalism. I'm just like, yeah, I'm sorry, man. And you know this all too well. That's not to say, I think I have to be fair, there are amazing Muslim academics. There are amazing Muslim academics who, but the problem is those are not the ones who are studying quote unquote traditional. And those are not the ones who are seen as traditional scholars. They're seen as academics. But the students of knowledge scene is pretty much the same. And there's no independent thinking. There's no independent reasoning. So I thought, yeah, I'm done with that.
Right. Okay. A few episodes ago, I had Cyrus McGoldrick, who I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he's currently doing his PhD in Turkey, and he basically spoke about this exact thing where there seems to be a divide between like political activism and, you know, traditional sacred knowledge. And we kind of just spoke about like where it stems from, because obviously we have a history of, you know, activism, Imam Hassan being one of the greatest examples. But what are your ideas regarding like where that disconnect came from exactly?
I think it comes from so many reasons. I think there's insecurity from a lot of these scholars. I feel there is a lack of willingness to engage with the times in which we're in. Because I have no issue, for example, I'm not someone that's like ideologically committed to a way and I can't be budged, but convince me. And the scholars, what I find is that they're condemning a lot of the activism circles, saying you lot are Marxists and you lot are this, and you know, and time again, these da'is and these scholars have no idea what they're talking about, like absolute no idea. They sound like, you know, a lot of these Republicans or a lot of these right-wing folk or right-wing adjacent folk in America talk about critical race theory.
Right.
And then, you know, that's exactly how the scholars sound when they speak about Marxism. So that disconnect, and let's be honest, a lot of disconnect as well is you would think if you were to speak to Muslim scholars, you would think that the number one existential threat to Islam is the LGBT movement. That's what you'd think. Yeah, that's what you would feel like. I'm like, it's not that deep. I promise you, it's not. Like, I promise you, you've had gay people in Islam, in the history of Islam since forever, and it's not an agenda. It's not it's a movement that's got a lot of traction right now. Yes, it does. It's in your face, cool. But I feel like, and then what happens though, because these scholars are not radical and they're reactionary, they believe that to combat against the left, we must align ourselves with the right.
Right.
Notwithstanding, the right is more often not racist, xenophobic, but it's like, no, at least the right has conservative values. And Islam is somehow more aligned with those conservative thinking. And I feel that's ridiculous, because the right is not conservative values. The right has been shaped by, you know, capitalism. And we can speak about that further. But yeah, so I think that's what disconnect comes from. And then, you know, it's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So a lot of the scholars have tried to make their friends on the right wing of politics. But then what happens then is they further then alienate those on the left. Because again, it's like this. When you're speaking about politics, you're going to have, if as a Muslim, I think you have two choices. You can either align with people who are doing the work that you're doing and they agree with you on certain principles, or you can start your own thing. I have no issue. I would love to see how Muslim activism should be done. I would love to see that. But there's nothing. There's no scholars putting out a Muslim activism guide. It's just, oh, don't be with those people. But okay, then do what?
Yeah. And I think one of the most glaring examples, like previous you just mentioned, George Floyd's murder, was how before even condemning his death, they were talking about the riots, right? Especially in New York. And me personally, my dad's store was, looted, and we had to pay like hundreds of thousands in damages. And me personally, I know the greater cost, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of our older generation, they may see that, and now they have, a greater hesitancy to join that type of movement. And then that prevents further education. But what compounds to that is the fact that scholars themselves, they're not trying to educate the masses. They're trying to just redirect the energy to, no, the rioting shouldn't happen. Why are you protesting? Why are you burning things down? And it just became two-sided. Like, I think that's one of the most glaring examples where I remember, like, it just became like it was either one side or the other. You were either like with traditional Islam, or you were with the activist scene. And it just didn't seem like they meshed together for a lot of people. So then they have to make that choice, and it's just very complicated.
Yeah. I mean, end of the day, it's not, for me, it's not very complicated.
Right. Yes. So
for me, it's not very
for many, it's not
complicated. Completely honest. No, for many, it might be complicated because they see, oh, what's happening. But again, the largest Muslim group in the US is the Black Muslims.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? So again, that should be the people you're standing up for. And whether we like it or not, a lot of the freedoms that non-Black Muslims enjoy in terms of like being able to be visibly Muslim was because of the struggle that Black Muslims took on.
Definitely.
But that history is not taught. So I understand why the disconnect there is that disconnect. And let's be honest, I mean, this is why I wouldn't call myself a Marxist, but I do have a Marxist lens in analysis. A lot of DESIs are middle class. I mean, and let's not even talk about the DESIs now in the States. Talk about the patterns of migration from Pakistan and India. For example, we know in the UK, the patterns of migration were working class people. They came as laborers, as people to work in factories. So we have a working class cohort of people. Whereas in DESIs in the States, came as doctors, lawyers, engineers, for the most part. Not everyone, but for the most part.
I'm not sure if that's for Bengalis per se.
Yes,
but
Bengalis,
I do say it for like Indians.
Pakistanis
definitely.
and Indians.
Yeah, definitely.
Pakistanis and Indians. But again, a lot of time they came from a different socioeconomic background. I mean, the Bengalis are the same in the UK. They're like the lowest as well in the UK as well. But what I mean to be specific.
Right, I get your point.
Yeah. So naturally, we have to understand, this is where I have my Marxist lens. When you have certain material interests, that shapes your politics. You want tax breaks, you want lower taxes, and the party to offer lower taxes is the Republicans. You want to be tough on crime. Why? Because unfortunately, like you said, your dad's shop got looted now, yeah? And you can be honest with me. I don't think your dad's gonna vote for defunding the police. You know what I mean? He's not gonna vote for defunding the police.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even though we know for a fact that even with policing budgets being full or even inflated, that wouldn't have prevented that happening. We know that for a fact. But at the same time, because of we've been brought in, please keep our streets safe, and the police are important, and all these other things. Again, your socioeconomic background, which means your material interests, guide your politics. So that's why it's not shocking to me with people who are Muslim from certain backgrounds, be they white or be they Pakistani, Indian, or middle class in general, have certain politics. It doesn't surprise me.
Definitely. Okay. So you did mention that you have a lot of Marxist ideas, or you've studied it a lot. A lot of scholars would say that any of these isms, and you can choose whatever ism, right? That does not correlate with Islam whatsoever. So what are your thoughts on that?
Again, I just want them to read. I mean, the thing at the end of the day, many Black Muslims adopted a Marxist, and I think again, all I would say to those people, and please, Shakil, if you have to promise me, if you ever get a scholar that calls Marxism like kufr or not compatible with Islam, just please ask them to define it. Just ask them to define it. That's all you have to do is ask them to define it. Because yes, there is an antagonistic relationship between Marxism and religion. Yes, there is. And if you reject the Marxism determinism, for example, as in like, how they view human beings, how they view human history, yeah, we can disagree on that. But again, it's like two things now. Either you can use his critique of capitalism, which is the best we've had since is the best critique of capitalism we have, or you can adopt and make and create a new one based on Muslim principles. I have no issue with that, but you haven't done either. All you've just done is call it a kufr.
Right.
So again, that's why and I think as well, for me, it's not about, that's why I don't like put it in my bio. I don't introduce myself as that. It's not that deep to me. I mean, these people, it's not a religion. It's not a madhab.
Right.
It's literally just a lens of critique in which I use. And there's several lenses. There's a Marxist lens. As we're going to go into the critical race theory lens. It's just lenses that help you understand the world in which you're in. That's
Definitely.
it.
So the main thing that everyone kind of brings up regarding Marxism is the history of the Soviet Union, right? Russia, the amount of deaths due to the famines, how they suppressed religious communities, especially the Muslims. And so I think that's what they bring up rather than the actual ideology of it, or like the ideas coming from Marxism.
Good. So I think again, it's just intellectual dishonesty, because in our lifetime, we have 1 million dead Iraqis by George Bush. In our life, and he's a super capitalist. In our lifetime, in Churchill organized a famine of 3 million Bengalis. Slavery was capitalism. Slavery was actually capitalism. What the Haitian Revolution was a revolt against capitalism. So again, it's like, okay, and this is not about whataboutism. We can talk about what happened in the Soviet Union. We can talk about the failures in which they did, and we can talk about the good things they did. Yeah, we can have that conversation. But again, that's not in the ideology itself. That's just how it played out. Unfortunately, whereas I would say capitalism by necessity requires exploitation.
Okay.
It requires exploitation. It requires people to be on the bottom. It requires certain people to have their labor expropriated for it to function. Colonialism, what is that? Neocolonialism that happens right now by way of imperialism, by way of American corporations, is literally like, I don't know for what phone you have. I have an iPhone. Yes. Me having an iPhone, you have an iPhone. Us having an iPhone means that a poor young woman, a poor young girl or boy in Congo had to mine for cobalt for our phone. So again, I just find it a bit of intellectual dishonesty personally when we talk about like, okay, yes, we can talk about. I mean, for me, what happened in the Soviet Union, again, it depends which period you're talking about. Let's say Lenin's time, and the reason why I think those things are quite inspirational, because it was an uprising of peasants. It wasn't people it wasn't the uprising in industrial states. It was an uprising of people who were like poor people, not very organized, and they overthrew the superstructure of the day. And that's always going to be inspiration for me. And as well, it's like, again, at that time, we're talking about industrialization. How can a country industrialize itself? You have to industrialize to keep up with the time you're in. The West industrializes off slavery. Britain becomes a powerhouse that it becomes because of slave trade, which was a genocide on Black people. And then it continues to industrialize and expropriate wealth by exploiting Africa today. That's all of Europe, and that's all of America, Europe, and the West today, still today. So again, I think we have to have an honest conversation about what happened. We can talk about the failing. I'm not a fan of like Stalin, for example. I'm not. I'm not like a sycophant of these people. Like, oh my God, I have to worship these people, or I have to defend it. No, I don't. I think, okay. For example, Lenin, I find inspiration in what some things he said and some things he did, and he made mistakes. He's not perfect. But again, I think one thing we have to contend with, and this is what I find people don't contend with, we have to ask ourselves why so many Black revolutionaries took up Marxism. And as well, if we look at the Soviet Union during the 20th century, they backed Black people. They spoke in favor of the Black struggle in America. So again, that's why those people chose that side. Whereas you got people, so again, who are you going to be with? You're going to be with people who are backing you or people who are oppressing you. I think it's an easy decision to make.
Definitely. So would you say that capitalism now, because you mentioned so many examples of why capitalism is wrong, obviously. So would you say capitalism is the actual greatest enemy to not only Muslims, but everyone in humanity, pretty much?
100%.
Okay.
100%. I think capitalism is but again, I think let's not be reductionist.
Right.
When I mean capitalism, I mean in all its manifestations. So I mean capitalism by, like, again, it's like Kwame Ture says that if a white man wants to lynch me, that's his problem.
Right.
If he has the power to lynch me, then that's my problem. And capitalism gives him that power. So again, it's like, for me, I'll be honest with you, I'm not interested in people, like, if you're racist in your corner, I don't care. Like, you don't like Black people, okay, that's nice for you.
Right.
But if you have the ability to act on your prejudice, that's problematic for me. And that system that allows that is the system of capitalism. So again, that's what, and then again, the global South, or in Africa today, in Zambia, people are mining for copper. Switzerland, Nestle, we know how they expropriate labor, sweatshop factories. In India, 700 million people a day go without food. And that's a capitalist country. You see what I mean? So again, it's like, if you talk about suffering in the world, and again, I don't want to be reductionist and say like, oh, once capitalism over, the world will be perfect. No, it's not true.
Right.
It's not true. I don't believe liberation or freedom is solely found in the material. Anyway, I'm Muslim. I believe there's spiritual aspects to freedom. I believe there's spiritual aspects. There's obviously material aspects. There's political aspects. These things are all come together. But I'm thinking like in the immediate time, we can deal with capitalism. We can deal and attack that on the front, and we can get unified in that attack.
Definitely. Okay. Would you say that, because obviously capitalism has been here for so long, slavery was there for, hundreds of years before it was finally abolished everywhere else. And of course, it still exists in other parts of the world. But would you say that this political activism, because this is again another critique that many scholars have, is activism even effective, really, if it's not done the proper way, quote unquote? And if it isn't, then what is the, well, they would say it's not, but from their lens, it's pretty much why bother, right? Why not just stick to my dua and my salah and then get those things right?
Again, I'll say, I think it's quite interesting to be a Muslim saying that when we look at the Prophet's examples, and not just the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. So, when we look at the prophets, what was Musa in the house of Pharaoh? And Bani Israel.
They use the example of when you speak to Pharaoh, speak softly. So they use that example.
They use that example. But again, for me, most of the prophets were anti-culture. They were counterculture. They were revolutionaries in their time because they were the minority going against the majority. So again, it's like, I mean, the thing is, I always say to people, okay, I can't swear, can I? I'll say to people, if you're just scared, just say that. Okay. If people are scared, just say that. Don't like dress it up in like, oh no, it's the proper thing to do and make dua. No, if you don't want to be on the streets and you're scared, just say that. That's okay. And that's okay. Not everyone's built like that. But I think to kind of garb it up and say it's not effective, it is effective. Have things changed? Of course. Have reforms been made? Of course, throughout history. I mean, the unfortunate thing is that history has told us that change only takes place when it's most of the time through violent means.
Right.
That's what history teaches us. And then through peaceful means, you might get a new legislation here or there, but then is it enforced? Probably not. But I think we should never underestimate the role activism has in shifting public opinion. I mean, right now, as we speak, on the 29th of May, we've seen what's happening in Palestine and Gaza.
Definitely.
Can we not say that the shift has changed in public opinion? Like openly in the Congress of the United States, they're calling Israel an apartheid state. I mean, last week we had 200,000 people march in the UK streets.
Yeah.
Like that has an effect. Look, Ireland has now recognized the illegal occupation and said it's considering sanctioning Israel. Most countries now back, I think it was the US vetoed it, but most countries back to ceasefire that was going to be enforced. So again, like I have to understand activism, what the role of activism is. Obviously, you can organize locally, but what it does is that it's to put pressure on those in power to shift their opinions, to shift them and to move them to certain positions. And I think that has been effective. I mean, right now, like George Floyd's death, like right now, people are calling it the global reckoning on race since that point. And it has been that, and it's continuing.
Definitely. So I do want to move the conversation because you just mentioned it so many times, critical race theory, which seems to be a very divisive topic.
Depending on who you talk to.
Depending on who you talk to, right? So correct me if I'm wrong, but critical race theory, it seems to be the framework of how every system in place currently, or at least in the West, is racialized, and it is built to suppress, Black people and other communities through socioeconomic disparities and political disparities. Would that be an accurate definition?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a discipline, and again, it's a lens.
Okay.
So, in the sense that it's born out of critical legal studies,
right?
And it's basically this fundamental question that critical race theory attempts to answer is, why is it after years of civil rights movement and legislation after legislation, why are we still reproducing the same amount of disparities based on race in our country, in the States? So what it says is that it's trying to answer those questions. Why is it in our institutions we still see the same level of disparity, racialized disparity, Black, brown, and white? Why is it still the case? So it seeks to address and understand that. And with that comes with a certain few presuppositions that they're going to accept as just given facts. The one of the given facts is that the country is racist. The institutions are racist. So we're not going to have, we're not going to have that discussion of, even till today, we have this debate. Is the UK race? I'm thinking, oh, God, man. Are you not tired yet? Like, how many times do we have to report after report after report? Like we see in the UK, you're more likely to die from COVID if you're a ethnic minority.
Yeah.
Less likely to get a job, less likely to get a promotion, less likely to more likely to be stopped and searched, more likely to have police force used on you. Like, at which point, I mean, it's like the other day, Joe Biden says America is not a racist country. Okay. I would, again, all these people say that these countries are not racist, but I'd like to know, okay, at which point did it no longer become racist? That's what I want to know. Because it definitely was a time it was racist. I mean, the constitution that taught that Black people were 3/5 of a human being, that was a racist, that was the country's founding document. So my question is, okay, then at which point did it not become racist then? And they can't answer that question. It's not divisive. It's because it's been taken by the right and weaponized to say, it's teaching that white people are all evil. It's teaching that all white people are bad and have privilege. And it doesn't teach that. It doesn't, again, as always, the language of race can always be weaponized. And that's what the right has done today. But yeah, that's Definitely. Like a short version of that. People can read the works of Derek Bell and many critical race theorists today about defining what it is and what it seeks to do.
Definitely. And so I work in healthcare. I'm wearing scrubs right now. I have to go to work literally.
Oh, really? What are you? What do you do?
So I'm a nursing student. I have one more year left, and on weekends I work at an urgent care. I don't know if you have those in the UK, but urgent cares are basically you're quick in and out. You have a fever, you don't want to go to your GP. You just go there. You do COVID tests. The vaccines are also there. Quick in and out. Physicals as well. So pretty much we took a couple courses on this, health policy and whatnot. We go through some of the histories, and you just look at our own histories. It's one of the most supposedly humane industries, right? Healthcare. You're supposed to treat people, save lives. You have things like the Tuskegee experiments. You have things, so many examples where Black people have been subjected to experiments or suppressed for
even
supposedly
today,
greater good.
You find that it's still believed in the medical profession that Black people have a higher pain threshold.
Yeah.
If you're Black, you're less likely to receive certain pain medications. And that's wild.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, Black mothers are more likely to die from childbirth than,
Exactly.
yeah. And like you said, it has to do with the structures, right? So a lot of these hospitals, if you kind of go at it from a macro scale, a lot of these hospitals where, you know, Black mothers are dying, they're in poor neighborhoods just because of the socioeconomic disparities that have been existing for centuries. And those hospitals don't have the proper resources. The staff may be not fully trained, and they may be understaffed even. And so there's just so many factors where it's just not like, you know, one thing. It's not like, oh, it's a bad nurse that did it. It's just the whole thing is it's racist, right?
And I think people really misunderstand this. Yeah, structural racism is not about the individual.
Yeah.
If a Black police officer shoots a Black man, that's still structural racism. That is still because the reason that the man has become in contact with the police is a set of circumstances that has led to that moment to happen. That is structural racism. Even if let's say a man is selling loose cigarettes, let's say the issue of Eric Garner, for example, let's say he was choked out by a Black man, let's say he was, that will still be an example of structural racism, because him having to sell cigarettes is because of maybe his poverty, which is an issue of, which is engineered. Poverty is engineered. Unemployment is engineered. Maybe a criminal record. These things, not to say Eric Garner, but people in general. All those circumstances and events that led you to be encountering with the police, be they white, Black, or brown, is a set of circumstances that are engineered and born out of structural racism.
Right.
So I think people, and again, this is why, and this is again, I'm gonna sound like a broken record, why I adopt a material analysis lens, because I don't care about the interpersonal racism. It doesn't have that much effect on you. You have to attack the structures.
Gotcha. Okay. So I know, especially with critical race theory, there's I don't know if it's a huge voice in the Muslim community, but I've seen like papers here and there kind of deconstructing it or refuting it. I haven't really read much of it just because they're a bit long. But what are the exact arguments against critical race theory?
The usual stuff, man. It's Marxist leaning. It's got non-Muslim fundamental understandings of the human being. It teaches that all white people are bad. And then they go, oh, it's pushed by queer people, and it's just not like. I would love, and again, my challenge against scholars, fine. You don't like critical race theory, fine. Produce something that you believe is a halal alternative to understanding how race plays out in institutions today. That's what I would say then. But no, you don't do that, but then you just criticize it. So what should we do?
Definitely. Okay. And so I just want to wrap up just because I know we've gone for a while. But this question is more just like a bonus question, just out of curiosity. So you said you studied in Markaz Imam Malik, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a couple, not of friends, but acquaintances that have also studied there. And so you adopted the Maliki madhab, I'm assuming, right? Okay. So this might be a bit controversial, but scholars that we may have looked up to within the Maliki madhab, especially prominent ones in the US and whatnot, such as Hamza Yusuf,
just say the name. Like,
I don't know. So because Hamza Yusuf, especially to me and a lot of my friends, he's been a huge influence.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, but in recent years, his politics just doesn't crack up the code, right?
His politics is not politicking, but
right.
It's okay.
I don't know if you can answer this, but it seems like scholars who, you know, have that Sufi leaning methodology, him, Abdullah bin Baya maybe, and I'm not sure about Imam Zaid Shakir, but and then Ibn Hamid Ali, they have these Sufi ideology going on. What would you say is the reason for why a lot of these scholars are not really, taking, I don't know if it's the correct stance, but they're not really, going towards like activism or actually speaking against injustice, and they're kind of just making like really weird alliances.
I think you've mentioned so many different people, so I think it's difficult to put them all in
right.
box.
I know.
Bin Baya, he was a politician for quite some time. He's an amazing scholar, but obviously he has his alignments with certain governments because he has a foundation and he has to get funding. Hamza Yusuf, again, he's a middle-class white man. And I think that becoming a Muslim doesn't remove you from that. So he has a certain way of viewing the world, and he believes in that whole liberal understanding of conservatism. He believes in that. So people you saw he's gonna be with
Jordan Peterson
coming, I think August the 5th. And again, I'm not shocked. That's like the most natural progression of Hamza Yusuf to come. Hamza Yusuf for me is like the Muslim Jordan Peterson. And that says a lot. I think Jordan Peterson is a racist, white supremacist. I believe that. Hamza Yusuf, do I believe is a white supremacist? Probably not. Do I believe that he has very problematic views on race? Absolutely. Because when I think it's very interesting because I still recommend Hamza Yusuf to people.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Okay.
I don't know about that, but
when it comes to your opinion, isn't it? That's your opinion.
So
yeah. Karen?
So I just wanted to mention that when it comes to like getting people involved in the spiritual aspect of Islam, he's one of the best go-tos in my opinion.
I think, it is. If people come to me and want to get back on the deen, or they want to learn have an understanding of Islam, which is not as harsh or whatever, of course, Purification of the Heart series, great. Introduction to Maliki Fiqh series, great. Those series and talks with the annoying nasheed in the background, great. That's not a problem. But that's it for me, Hamza Yusuf. I don't take his view on the world. I don't take his view on politics. I don't take his view on activism or a race, anything like that. And I would advise people against that.
Definitely. Okay. So that was pretty much it. Jazakallah khair, Momodou, for being on. So do you have anything to shout out? Where can they find you? The Malcolm Effect, where can you listen to that?
Yeah, please subscribe to the Malcolm Effect mainly on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and then hit me on Twitter, Momodou Taal, and then also on Instagram, The Gambian.
Amazing. So you heard it here. Jazakallah khair, Momodou, for being on. And I know the viewers are definitely going to check you out because you said so many gems in this past hour or so. So take care. Have a nice day. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Also, I just realized I forgot to say the dua at the end. So, subhanakallahumma bihamdika wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Peace, guys. See you guys next week.